recently read Econ. Of course, I didn't understand everything. My thesis today is that the way things have developed, because you have these nations that have invested in upholding their banking and their securities operations, that banking has suffered fundamentally forever been changed into the nation state banking service. You don't necessarily have an independent at all banking system, which means that the government fails and lives and dies in relation to its banking system that it creates and it runs. Now, for the small wealthy person, I mean, middling wealth, say between 30 million and 5 million, I don't believe that there's any wisdom in being involved in much of the securities, derivatives, CDOs, credit default swaps, any of that stuff. Not even hardly any stocks and bonds. All I would see that for the middling wealthy person is available is real estate or a business that they can touch. In other words, their own business or a business that they are personally acquainted with the people who they've given the investment money to help them run this business. As a business grows, it does need credit. Okay, a lot of what is happened, from what I can tell, and I'm not the expert, Yves Smith is the expert, is that certainly China has because they ended up with a lot of money because of the free trade ideology, which in its first iteration in the 1840s England moved England's overall security and wealth just right down the tubes, to the point by after World War I, England was basically poor. A lot of that has to do with free trade ideology. It's striking to me that free trade is so prominent in GOP politics, as if history didn't show that it was a failed concept for a nation. Then the nation turns around and buys the banks, but most of the people who had middling wealth, to protect themselves, bought real estate or invested in a company that supplied a real need, even if it was, an ice cream shop. I mean, or five associated stores of some sort, or a service. That's pretty much the way I size it up. I mean, it isn't a merit world. Meritocracy got even worse. I mean, it was bad enough in that when you look at the financial systems, rich families bought for sons and daughters seats on the stock exchange. It's not like you got there by merit, And these things were just part of the system that most of us accepted. For the working classes, that period after World War II and then on through 1972, when we went off the gold standard, because we didn't want to give the French any of the gold, or couldn't, because of the debts incurred over the Vietnam War. The petrodollar was created. The petrodollar is wobbling. It's been a reserve currency because there was trust in the U.S. Financial system. That trust is eroded more and more by the financial engineers who learned early on to loot all the wealth of loot with the crony capitalists of the Russians, loot all the wealth that had been, whatever had been created by the Soviet workers. They were, as far as I can tell, totally betrayed. Now, they're sold a story, it's all our fault. Some of it is, but a lot of it's London bankers, too, So, that's where I'm at today, and I could read you this. The 2008 financial credit crisis led to the collapse of several notable investment banks, such as the bankruptcy of large investment bank Lehman Brothers, hurried sale of Merrill Lynch, and the much smaller Bear Stearns, to much larger banks, which effectively rescued them from bankruptcy. Now, how did these banks become bankrupt? Well, that was the credit default swaps and derivatives that were insured and labeled at AAA investments when they weren't. Now, some say that what happened was there was all this Chinese money sloshing around. They figured it was being invested. They figured out how to, just get it out the door and list the debt as assets. The government loans are troubled asset really TARP. Surviving U.S. bank investment banks such as Goldman Sachs were converted to traditional bank holding companies to accept TARP relief. Whatever happened to the investments that other investors, manage, and what happened to that money? Did individual investors? That's what we're talking about when we talk about it. Well, it was wiped out. Okay, they got all the money from the government, and they reached 13 trillion without much. Lending did not increase, and credit markets remained frozen. The crisis led to the question. I'm reading from Wikipedia, by the way. It goes on, but at any rate, unless you've got, lots of money, I'm talking, in the $200 million range, and electronic, algorithm robot investing appeals to you, and you feel like you can manipulate nations, you're better off running a company of your own, investing in a company where you know the people and it's a product that is in demand, like even bicycles or cars or something, anything. Make it yourself. You got to really know the people. Otherwise, buy real estate. You want me to sing you a song?